Hey, what's going on, everybody? How's it going? Jesse Montano here. Another episode, Gorilla Sports Off Ice after a nice, long holiday weekend. I'm going to be joined by Meghan Angley here in just a moment. But as always, do want to remind you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Head on over there. Right now is the perfect time for you to head over. Check out trustedamerican.com/sports. They want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. And even if you go right now, trustedamerican.com/sports, see if they can help you. Maybe go a couple months without having to make that mortgage payment. Perfect time of year. Hit that summer vacation. Go to trustedamerican.com/sports. See how much money they can help you start saving today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome in. I'm Jesse Montano. That is Meghan Angley, and this is Gorilla Sports Off Ice. Woo! I don't know the last time this has happened, Meghan, where the news breaks just before we start the show. It's usually the exact opposite, right as we wrap up for the day. They decide to make a bunch of announcements, but we do have some breaking news out of the Colorado Avalanche Organization we're going to talk about in just a moment. We're also going to get into what the Avs have been up to this offseason so far, who's in, who's out, and what is still left to do. As always, Meghan, we're going to start with how you're doing, but more specifically, how was your trip? You were on vacation for the holiday.
Yes, I went to Minnesota and experienced a classic Minnesota 4th of July on the lake. My best friend is from there. Her parents live on Lake Minnetonka, and I always heard wonderful things about her childhood growing up, and I got to drive by some of the rinks she skated at growing up. She was a competitive figure skater.
Nice.
And I got to go on the water, and it was so much fun and really cool for me.
Did you get in the water?
Yes.
See, I am not an open water guy.
I feel like you could be talked into lake swimming. There's nothing in it that could hurt you.
See, but I think lakes are grosser, personally.
Yeah. I think there is some worried about like brain eating amoebas, but
those little things.
Anything can kill you if you try hard enough.
Brain eating amoebas. I love that's where you went. But no, that's do you guys have like slides, or were you jumping off the boat?
Just jumping off the boat, doing
yeah.
noodles. I heard about this place in Lake Minnetonka called Big Island, and when Kim Kardashian was married to Chris Humphries, he's actually from this area. So he brought her to Big Island on Lake Minnetonka, and she described it as like Vegas in the water. And I saw pictures of this place, and I was in a group of about 8 or so people, and all of them were protecting me from Big Island. And that's where I think you could probably find like slides and things. Okay. But they told me I would catch so many things if I went there. But one person in the group was like, I think you'd thrive at Big Island. So
all right. So what I'm mostly learning here is this group has varying opinions of you and who you are.
Yes. One of the girl who was like, I think you'd thrive there. She was a friend from college that I'd only ever gone out with once. So I was nervous about the impression that I left in college that led her to saying I would thrive at Big Island. But so I didn't go. I was protected.
My wife and I talk about this a lot. How like, isn't it funny? And this is a great example of like people in your life, whether it be at various stages or even just how you know person, mutual friends, work, past, like there's so many people that know different versions of you.
Yes.
And like they have like, you could talk to one person. It's like my wife, when we were younger, like there was a few times we went out and she got like pretty fucked up. And like, there's some people that like we don't hang out with regularly who like, that's their main memory for like, oh man,
crazy.
She's nuts. Can't go out without getting wasted. And it's like, that was a couple of times in pocket instances. You just happened to be there for both of them and not really around us much else otherwise.
Yep.
And I feel like this is maybe the experience.
I wasn't even crazy. I was going to
say, I feel like I've gotten to know you decently well, and I can't picture you having like a crazy time in your life.
No.
Just unhinged.
No, but I think she wanted to go to Big Island and she needed.
You'd be great.
I'll go with you. You do great there. You're coming with me. And everybody else vetoed it. So it was super fun.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. I love Minnesota. I'm fully in on Minnesota. Everyone's like, you need to come in the winter. I think you would change your mind.
Yeah.
But I live in a rink 9 months out of the year. I think I'd be fine.
I don't know. I've been there a couple times during the season, and that walk from the hotel to the rink is chilly. It is, and it's like it's that like bone chilling kind of cold. It just like goes right through your layers.
Perfect. I want to feel it.
I think you had another story. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you guys, I'm not stalking. I want to get in front of this.
Oh, do you think this might get out there?
No, I think it's funny though. So Sam Alinsky signs this extension with the Avs. He gets qualified to get this 1-year deal done. So I go straight to the source, you guys. All right. I follow the Malinskys. No, but there was an incident on the water of Lake Minnetonka. And I did not say hi. I ran away. And I just want you all to know that I have experienced every reaction between freeze, flight, and fight. So just be glad that I didn't choose fight. Okay? Just be glad.
Megan maintained her professionalism and ran as fast as she could.
I sprinted out of there.
Well, maybe over the holiday, not a lot happened, but there has been some new developments on the first day that you were out of town. The Avs sign Brent Burns. We got a chance to talk to him over Zoom. But really, Megan, like what you and I talked about just amongst ourselves, and I think even on the pod from Family Sports, there's not a lot happening. It's still very slow moving, not just for the Avs. Like Chloe and I this morning, as we were just sitting in the office bullshitting, like Yoel Kiviranta is still just out there. There's a lot of players who are still just kind of out there waiting to see how the market,
and I will be following them.
Falls. Yeah. Yeah. Back to where they're from. But let's, I want to get into all of that. What the Avs have done, what is still needing to be done. I actually talked to Zach Robb, not to put his first and last name fully on blast on this pod.
Everyone.
Yeah. But just this morning, who I know you've met, and we were just talking about like, well, gosh, what are the Avs going to do? They still got, you got your bottom six that you need to fix. But maybe more pressingly, they have some coaching roles they need to fill.
Right.
And wouldn't you know it, right before we go live on this show, the Avs do make the announcement. They have hired Dave Hakstol, former Seattle Kraken head coach, former coach of the year finalist, to the bench, to Jared Bednar's staff. He is taking the place of Ray Bennett, who was relieved of his duties, Megan, after that first round loss to the Dallas Stars. Ray Bennett, of course, was in charge of the Avs power play, and it just dried up at the wrong time. The Avs need to make a move. That was one they decided to make. Let me just start by you, because you put out a tweet saying that this was the type of swing you wanted to see the Avs make. Initial broad strokes reaction, Dave Hakstol hired as an assistant coach for the Colorado Avalanche.
Well, I wanted them to aim high. Wow. In pursuing somebody who had head coach NHL experience. And I think obviously an assistant role is going to be different than from a track record of a head coach. And so I look at Dave Hakstol, and I personally was impressed by him in the Seattle series and the Avs title defense season. And I understand that his overall record as a head coach probably doesn't inspire a lot of optimism in some people, but being close to his coaching insight during that series, I was really impressed by him. I thought that he prepared his team that had much better depth at that point with a really strong game plan to go toe-to-toe with the Avs and really counter a lot of what they did well as a team. And I thought they were pretty successful in deploying it. And
very disciplined, incredibly disciplined.
Extremely disciplined, extremely detail-oriented. And just his composure was impressive to me. And so they're not asking Dave Hakstol to come and be the head coach of the Colorado Avalanche, right? They just need him as a voice behind the bench to round out an already strong coaching staff, obviously headed up by Jared Bednar. And I think that what I'm obviously going to key in on, this is not broad strokes anymore, is his success on the power play. And that is certainly open for discussion. That's the conversation, right?
Well, hold on, let's circle back to that, because I want to focus on what you were talking about, that defensive discipline that, you know, he really helped bring, and that structure. And to your point, it's still Jared Bednar's bench. This is his team, no doubt about it. But I'm so anxious to see how that, what we saw even in the years where Seattle struggled. Like, I have long felt that I didn't love the way they put together their team out of the expansion draft. And I remember talking to players saying, like, they're pesky as hell to play against in the regular season. They don't necessarily know if they have the depth, if they don't have the, you know, if they have the stars to go on a deep run in the playoffs, but they're pesky to play against and they're structured. And I'm just so curious to see how Dave Hakstol is going to be able to bring that elements of what he was able to coach out of Seattle and integrate that into whichever part of this lineup that he's in charge of. And I wanted to make sure that we hit on that, because I think that's a great place, you know, that you started with what we saw deployed against this Avalanche team just 2 seasons ago.
Yeah. And obviously, you know, the blow of losing Val Nichushkin and Cale Makar's brief suspension in this series, like, we understand there is context to where the Avs were at as a team going into that, but I think there's a lot of credit due to Seattle's role in making that as challenging a series as it was. You know, it was the wild card team that year. And I think a credit to the way that team was constructed wasn't sustainable, and management had a say in that too. And that's why I don't think they had continued success past this year. But the depth of that team, they didn't commit to keeping it past that season. And that's why I think Seattle struggled. But I think Hakstol's ability to get the most out of his depth is an important thing to take away from that, and that Seattle team specifically. And so when I look at special teams, that's where it gets a little weirder too, is the head coach absolutely has a hand in the overall look and feel of special teams, but obviously then there are assistants who are working on that more closely. And I think what's interesting too is the talent available to him for a power play. For example, I look at where Matty Beniers was, just as an example. He was still so new into the league and so young in his utilization and earning trust, that I'm so curious to see what a coach like Hakstol would do then with the core that is here in Colorado. I think those are the key differences in that Seattle group that I'm talking about and this current Avalanche team, that it's hard to then really look too closely at the past results, though I do think there's intriguing things to dig into there. But rather, there is something to be said for then a clean slate too, in the caliber of talent that will be available to Hakstol that's here in Colorado, in the likes of Nathan MacKinnon and Cale Makar.
Well, and I know it's kind of apples to oranges here, but, you know, part of the frustration from the Avs organization with what happened in that first round against Dallas is that, one, we saw it throughout the entire season, that the power play was inconsistent. They'd go through white hot stretches, then they'd just go cold for weeks. And you hit a cold stretch in that postseason. And I know some of the frustration was, like, there were things that just stopped happening that the power play was doing on repeat for the weeks leading up to the playoffs. And that, you know, unbelievable dynamic between Nathan MacKinnon and Marty Netchus and how much more they were moving, it all kind of stopped. And there wasn't, like, nothing was done to get that reinvigorated. Like I said, I know I'm maybe making a stretch here, but given what we were just talking about, and, you know, whether the talent in Seattle wasn't up to snuff or whatever it may be, that was a consistent effort that Dave Hakstol got out of his group, especially that year where he was up for Coach of the Year, knocked the Avs out in the playoffs, went to Game 7 of the second round.
Right, against Dallas.
It was, you knew what you were getting from them every night, every shift. It was just, are they good enough to keep going? Can Philip Grubauer keep enough pucks out of the net? And I do just wonder, you know, and I know there's probably some recency bias that's begging this question in my brain, but okay, so we saw a team flame out on the power play because the consistency lacked. Can a guy like Dave Hakstol, who's been a head coach at multiple times in the NHL, has a great track record in the NCAA, is this a guy who can maybe get some more consistency out of that power play and stop even the roller coaster ride that we saw in the regular season? Just a little bit more of a seasoned guy who's been a bench boss before, who knows how to cultivate those relationships and those conversations. I don't know. Like I said, maybe I'm reaching a bit here, but I do think that since we're talking about a guy who's going to be in charge, likely the power play. I do just wonder if that's a part of what they said or they liked is we think this is a guy who can drive some more consistency out of that group.
I think the other thing to consider in filling the role of who's heading up the power play specifically with the Avs is what kind of dynamic will exist between coach and players. It's important because of how established Colorado's guys are on that top unit and the voice and the role that they have in the execution of the power play. They have a lot of power and influence then in how they're going to execute on the power play. And as a result, I think it's important to have a voice that can strike the right balance of bringing a commanding presence that's going to get through to his players while respecting the position that they already hold on the power play. And I think, when there were other names that I considered for who the Avs could look here, there were some that I just didn't think would have the commanding presence enough, because I think players like McKinnon respect that. It has to be a very symbiotic relationship in a lot of ways, but you won't earn his respect if you don't have a little power and authority behind what you're doing. And that was my impression of Hakstol in Seattle as the head coach. And I think having, I don't want to say a lesser role, but a much more defined role as the assistant and heading up the power play, I think will allow him to channel that very specifically into what he's doing. And I think it will command a lot of respect that I think we'll grow to appreciate a lot more, because to your point, when the power play is struggling, they did need a new voice that was going to incite change, because at some point, whether this is Bennett's problem or not, they stopped listening. And so, because it was obvious to anybody watching this power play in the playoffs that they had stopped moving their feet and they were playing without taking any risks, and there just needed to be that wake-up call from a powerful voice then to incite that kind of change, and doing it in a way that will be received well and respected still. And I just really think that Dave Hakstol has that kind of presence.
Well, and again, like, this is where I think the conversation actually started with like they should hire Pete DeBoer. Like, wouldn't that be funny?
We're silly goofy.
But I do think that led us, and I could go back and find the episode, going down the road of like, hey, could they potentially make a hire for a former head coach who's got a little bit more of that authority, a little bit more of that stern voice, maybe isn't the right word, but again, just is used to coming from being the guy. Is that maybe a route that would make a little bit more sense? And that's what they end up doing. And I just, I think that's a very mature hire. And I think it's a hire that a lot of what you were just talking about, like, I think they kept that, again, what you were talking about of being able to communicate effectively and get the message across when it feels like, guys are starting to tune it out. Can you get everyone's attention back and get guys re-energized? I do wonder if some of that conversation internally was like, we should look at some guys who have maybe had head coach jobs before, because they're maybe more effective communicators.
Yeah. I think a new voice generally will do this power play a lot of good too, because I think there can be some going through the motions of what has brought them success in the past, and maybe a false sense of security because of what they've been able to accomplish so well together as a 5-man unit on the man advantage before in the past. It's a track record that should, it should carry a lot of weight, right? But sometimes I do think that reset, that wake-up call is what they need a reminder of periodically. And so everything that we're saying, it will take then a powerful voice to bring about that kind of a reset as needed. And I'm excited to see then, because this obviously is a different role for Hakstol. How does he wear that responsibility that is a bit different in nature then as a result? But I think it could really suit him.
So I thought this was an interesting comment.
Most handsome coaching duo.
Yeah. Any duo that Jared Bednar is a part of is going to be up there.
Did Chloe say ew or
said damn? Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Damn with Y's. Jared Bednar said they weren't the high scoring Avs of the past. Wondering if this has anything to do with this hire, more defensive minded coach. I don't necessarily think that this is an admission of them saying, oh, we want to play a more defensive style of game. But with having some, if let's say you're going to go into this season with the decor as currently constructed, and we're going to talk about the decor here in a minute, You and I haven't had a chance to chat too much about it, but with the way that they were able to construct that Brent Burns contract, you feasibly could go into the season with this decor right here. 7, 8, 49, 42, 70, and whatever Brent Burns ends up taking. I think that's a really solid decor, but that's a lot of offensive-minded guys. I don't know. Is this a guy that you're maybe bringing in to tighten the screws top to bottom defensively? Saying, hey, we're going to go into next season with a little bit more of an offensive-minded decor. So we want to make sure that we've got a defensive-minded voice in this room that, again, can just help tighten those screws with an identity that we want to embrace of being a strong defensive team. I don't know, but I did think that was an interesting comment of...
I think it's incredibly interesting, in part because, one, Nolan Pratt is not out of the doghouse with the penalty kill. There's work to be done there. But when you hear about which coaches kind of have that tough disciplinarian mindset and are really keying in on the defensive details, it's typically Nolan Pratt that you hear talked about. Mm-hmm. Having a Hakstol alongside them behind this bench is probably some Nolan Pratt insurance, if you will, to have just another set of eyes on it that has that defensive mind. Because Hakstol's identity as a coach, at least around that Seattle team that I keep referencing, was an attention to detail, specifically the defensive details. When you look 5v5 at some of the shots allowed as a team, it was some of the lowest in the league. And a lot of that is good positioning as much as anything else. And so I think that that attention to detail defensively will translate well to a power play, not defensively, but attention to detail will. And then on the whole, the big picture of what this defensive identity needs to look like, just another set of eyes of a guy who gets it.
I think that's a great way of putting it is, again, that 2022 team was one of the most defensively disciplined teams I've ever seen in my life. So to your point, it's not that Nolan Pratt, Jared Bednar aren't effective defensive-minded coaches, but now you just got another set of eyes who is going to be able to give not only another set of eyes, a fresh set of eyes, be able to give different input. And hey, when we were able to bottle you guys up in Seattle, we were doing this, and this. And I really like this hire, Megan. And I think, for a guy like Hakstol, who didn't get a head coaching job as the carousel kind of settled, I think this is kind of adjacent to getting a guy like Pete DeBoer on your staff. Like, this is a guy who has been a head coach in multiple stops in the NHL. I think you got a guy that you maybe wouldn't normally get.
I agree.
To help run your bench.
I agree with that. I don't think this is a guy that typically would be available for an assistant coaching job. And I do think it's interesting, someone like Heino, who had been behind an NHL bench before coming to Colorado and working with the Eagles, ends up back behind a different NHL bench. I know people were curious, like, well, why not tap into Heino for this role? And I like the line of thought that it should be a guy who has that kind of experience behind an NHL bench. That's kind of the bar that needs to be cleared. But there's a personality component too. That, I think Heino is excellent at what he does, but I'm not sure that would have been the voice that is compatible with Nathan MacKinnon on the top unit.
Because you and I had talked about that off air, and that's what was kind of going through my mind when you were talking earlier about like how Hakstol might work with the caliber of players that are going to be on these power play units that he's working with. And I was just thinking about what you had said about Dan Heino, and while that maybe would have been really fun, and former Avs Stanley Cup champ, very successful power play with the Eagles, I just don't know how that would have meshed. I think this is Nathan MacKinnon expects greatness out of everybody. Nathan MacKinnon has standards for the media that walk into the locker room. I think that this is something where it's like, hey, we got to make sure that we're going to bring someone in that can handle those types of personalities.
Absolutely. That matters too. And so, but what you were just saying, like, this isn't maybe necessarily a guy that you'd expect to be available for this job. I'd agree with that. I don't think it's something we should take for granted. And I want to see how it goes, obviously, first and foremost, but I do think this is better than people are initially feeling about it.
So that's Dave Hakstol, Avs assistant coach. Since we last did a show, a new vacancy has opened up. And the other coaching position that they filled over the weekend was Mark Letestu taking over as the head coach for the Colorado Eagles. All good. Are you feeling like I am a bit disappointed that job didn't go to Toby Peterson? Skills coach for the Avalanche, who was hired by the Texas Stars to be the head coach for their AHL team, or for them. I said the Texas Stars. Toby Peterson is a guy that was really, really well liked within the Avs organization, highly credited from a lot of players and helping them get back to game speed. Gabe Landeskog worked with him a lot. Val Nichushkin worked with him a lot. Did great work with a lot of the young players. Do you share in my disappointment that Toby Peterson was allowed to get away when you had an opening in your organization that he ended up filling elsewhere?
It feels, I'm purely speculating too,
totally.
but it feels like he had to have been in consideration for some of these jobs, maybe, had his sights set on a couple. And so I don't know the order of events, but it does feel like perhaps he was interested in the assistant job behind the Avs bench. And so the Letestu hire maybe just didn't raise an eyebrow. But it does feel interesting then that the timing, I'm hoping, was at least a courteous conversation of Toby Peterson to the Avs, like, hey, I think we're going to go in this direction with Hakstol. So he commits to Texas then. But I guess my eyebrows were raised a couple different directions, because I am surprised that they didn't try to find a path of entry, even if it's, maybe behind the bench in Loveland to start and have him work his way up. Because he was very well respected and credited with a lot of success in rehabilitation among the players. They point to Toby Peterson and the role that he played in that so readily. And what I guess I find interesting and eyebrow raising is I didn't know he had coaching ambition like that. Obviously, as a skills coach, it's safe to assume there's some coaching ambition there, but I didn't know that it was to that level. And so I am a little bit sad that now knowing in hindsight that he slipped away, because I just didn't even really have him in mind for any of these roles. But I can see the fan reaction around Dallas, Texas is high. And they're excited to have him. So it makes me just a little bit sadder, because I liked having him in Colorado. But
former Dallas Star, should point out. So like he's got ties to the organization. For sure.
Well, that's where the recognition from the Dallas fan base is coming from, and why they're excited around him. And it is sad then that he won't be able to continue to bring that through the Avs organization. But I didn't know. I didn't know he had that kind of ambition. And obviously,
I'm super happy for him. I mean,
it's a huge step up.
Right. Since we're doxing everybody on this show anyways, I won't say where my neighborhood is, but Toby and I lived in the same neighborhood, so I'd run into him at neighborhood events and got to know him a bit. And I mean, just an outstanding guy. Knows the game extremely well. And genuinely, Megan, when I saw that news come down yesterday, he'd been hired to be the head. I said, "Fuck, you just had a head coach AHL job." If you want to, and like you said, maybe Dallas organization had engaged in talks with him weeks before. Maybe the Avs had talked to him about that job, and he had said, "Hey, we'd prefer to go back to Dallas." Just maybe that's where he. We don't know. There might be reasons that he wanted to go that route, and I don't know if we'll get an official answer at any point. But I would love to know.
Just go knock on his door. I'm sure he hasn't moved yet.
I would love to know if he was at least considered for that Eagles role, because if he wasn't, man, that feels like a miss to me. That feels like a miss to let a guy like that get out of, lose him out of your organization.
Yeah. I guess, there's sometimes a conventional way that coaches climb through the ranks, that going from NHL skills coach to head coach behind an AHL bench, it does feel bit of a deviation.
I agree.
And so maybe that's no state income. No, vaguely. But maybe.
But maybe the no state income tax did strike again. But no, I'm with you. It also caught me off guard. I just didn't think that skills coaches made that. I think I said on the show last week, he has the greatest job in the world. Like, he is just going to be the skills coach. Who knew that he wanted to be the guy behind the bench?
Greater ambition. And right. I share in your happiness for him, though. I'm excited for him. And yeah, I'm excited to, like, Texas had a good team this last year. So I'm excited to see the direction they go in from this point on. Yeah, no, for sure. And, but not that excited.
They are in the Eagles division, right?
No.
Is that new?
No.
Really?
They're West, but they're not Pacific.
Interesting.
Let me see. Texas Stars
I was actually just talking with an Eagles person
Central,
at camp last week about how the Eagles are in such a weird spot geographically for the AHL. Like, they don't really fit into either Central or Pacific. Doesn't matter. Point being, I'm happy for Toby. I hope he can climb the ranks and get behind an NHL bench. And I'd love to see him work his way back to the Avs organization at some point. But good on Toby Peterson, head coach of the AHL's Texas Stars. Do you have any thoughts on Mark Letestu, the hire that was made for the Eagles?
No, I'm not going to pretend like I've been following the AHL track record out east. But I am excited to get to know him because I loved Aaron Schneekloth, after Greg Cronin, who I came to love a lot as well. So I think they've had two really good hires back-to-back in head coaches out of Loveland. So I'm excited to meet Mark Letestu.
And like I said, I feel bad. It's not Mark Letestu's fault, but I'm like, well, now that hire feels lame, knowing that you could have just moved Toby into that role. And that's not fair to Letestu.
Well, and I was sad too that Tim Branham didn't get a look, but maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't want to look.
I mean, to be fair, Letestu did come up to the Avs coaching farm system that is the Columbus Blue Jackets organization.
Yeah.
So I guess we should have seen this one coming. Anytime we are that, you know what, Megan?
Look to Columbus.
We just need to start looking. All right, what are the Avs going to do? What do the Blue Jackets have, whether it be in their organization or on the NHL roster? And that's going to be our first
clue.
That's going to be our first clue as to what direction the Avs are going to go, because Mark Letestu has spent his entire coaching career so far with the Columbus Blue Jackets organization, and even spent a chunk of time with the Blue Jackets as an NHL player. And just to give a little bit more context to this, this is not something that, like, I bring up anecdotally. The Avs, a large portion of the Avs front office and coaching staff came directly from the Columbus Blue Jackets organization. The Avs have made several trades with the Blue Jackets over the last handful of years. We've talked about it on a show. These are clearly two very friendly organizations. Chris McFarland came up through the Blue Jackets organization. So that's probably where a lot of that, he goes back in and says, oh, I know a guy who I really loved working with over there. This is not a one-off here. The Avs really like to pull from the Blue Jackets organization.
As long as this marriage doesn't come at the expense of the homegrown
agree.
Colorado guys, that's why I was excited to see Schneekloth get the look at head coach after Cronin. And if Tim Brannon's path of upward trajectory still exists through the org, then I'll be happy. It's fine. But now with Toby gone, it just feels a little sad. Like, I still want to have, you got to water the plants at home too.
Yeah. I think that's a great way of putting it. And again, we don't know the exact circumstances of what happened with Toby.
Speculating.
But it is really easy to look at those two things happening 3 or 4 days apart. And to your point about watering the flowers at home, it's like, why the fuck do you keep watering their flowers? You got flowers.
You've got beautiful flowers at home.
Like, what are you doing? But time will tell. Mark Letestu, Toby Peterson.
I'm sure I'm gonna love
Dave
Mark
Hakstol. I'm sure he's a fine head coach, and I'm sure he's going to do good things with an Eagles organization that is committed to having a competitive roster, to putting a product on the ice that can compete and win. I'm sure that this is a hire that they didn't just make for funsies. But I like that analogy there. Make sure you're not neglecting the plants you got in your own backyard, in your own garden. I know the Blue Jackets have a very nice one.
Yes.
But you got some too. All right, let's shift gears here. Those are the guys who do all of the work before skates hit the ice. Well, that wasn't true of Toby for a while. Now let's talk about what the players on the ice are doing, what the Avs have done in terms of their roster. Obviously, they move on from Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood at the just before the draft. Over the course of that weekend, they add Gavin Brindley in that deal, another prospect that Mark Letestu will be very familiar with. With that, they added another pick. They take Francesco Delelce. I threw too many L's in there. Delelce. With that pick,
did they do a scrimmage on the final day of Dev Camp? ¿Por qué?
I don't know. They mixed the groups. So like forwards and defensemen were out there together, and they did some like battle drill type stuff. But no, they didn't actually scrimmage. And the third day was actually the shortest day by far.
That's so interesting.
They took a full hour off the top on ice. Goalies didn't get on the ice till 9:30.
I wonder if they view it because they're going to be hosting the rookie tournament that they're going to see most of these guys scrimmage in that game setting. But I'm disappointed because there were a couple NCAA guys that I really wanted to see in a scrimmage setting because they didn't necessarily pop those first 2 days, but I have high expectation for them. So
the closest thing they did to a scrimmage was, I think it was 2-on-2, like 2/3 ice, and you could shoot on either net, but in order to like gain possession, you had to pass it to either Milan Hajduk or Toby Peterson. You had to pass it to them, and then they would pass it back to you, and now your team had possession. You could shoot on either net. And then once the other team got it, they had to pass out to a coach, and that was the closest thing they did to a scrimmage, but that was even like they'd let the guys go for 30, 40 seconds, blow the whistle, and 4 new guys would go in. So that was the closest they got to scrimmaging.
Anything of note from that final day?
A fight had to be broken up.
What?
No one dropped their gloves, but there was,
Who?
A couple guys were giving to each other. Shit, I don't even know. There were a couple invite guys. None of the draft picks from this year. But yeah, me, Corey, and Evan were standing there watching, and a couple guys got into it, and whistles had to be blown. Hey, back in line. And that was kind of the end of it. But they had gone at each other throughout the course of the drill, and then it was just one too many. And yeah, these couple guys are getting in there. But really, honestly, Megan, I actually thought the third day was the least eventful day.
Wow. They knew I wouldn't be there.
That's right. They took their foot off the gas. But anyways, so we get to no, you're fine. They make a couple picks over the course of the weekend. Then we get into free agency, and the first day comes and goes, nothing. Eventually, we do get to a spot. The Avs re-sign Parker Kelly to an extension that kicks in next year. They get your Lake buddy, Sam Malinsky, re-signed for a deal that will kick in this year. I want to talk about that in a minute. And then they bring in Brent Burns on day 3 of free agency. It was a name that you and I had talked about over the course of several different shows. And hey, this is a name to,
I love at the end of the final show, you said it too. You're like, I'm just picking this. You're not like, you're not suggesting this is a rumor you're trying to start.
Not like stumping for it.
But goodness.
24 hours later.
Were you on the money? Maybe you should have committed to it as a rumor.
And the other thing that they do with the Brent Burns deal, Megan, is something that you and I had talked about, saying, I'd like to see them maybe get involved with this on a deal. And we maybe even said, for a guy like Brent Burns that, you're going to take a little bit of a risk on, is go that Jamie Benn contract construction route where it's officially a 1-by-1. It's a $1 million cap hit for the Avs this season, but with some several games played bonuses that could potentially get him all the way up to $4 million, and then an additional $1 million bonus that I think is going to be really tough for Brent Burns to hit, given the fact that Cale Makar and Devon Taves are on this team. So there's a $500,000 bonus every 10 games that Brent Burns plays. Now he's currently the NHL's leading Ironman. He's closing in on 1,000 consecutive games played. So nice bet on his part. So he gets an extra $500,000 for every 10 games played, and that counts against next year's cap. The last $1 million bonus that Brent Burns' contract has built into it is he will get an extra $1 million, Megan, if he averages over 21 minutes or 23 minutes?
I think it's 23.
23 minutes in 70 or more games this season. So that means if he goes 13 games without averaging over 23 minutes, he does not get that bonus. Like I said, especially if the Avs are going into the season with the roster as it's currently constructed, I don't think that's going to even come close to being a thing.
Only thing I could see, and it's a big if, is on the kill and kind of turning the keys over of those heavy PK minutes to Brent Burns.
Because he's a strong penalty killer.
He is and leaned on heavily coming out of Carolina with Slavin for top kill defenseman. And I know there's a lot of concern around what he really is as a player defensively, but there is truth around why he was leaned on so much for the kill. And when I think about Cale Makar at his best, you do want to see him utilized in other ways over the course of a game, right? Like if there is somebody that you can count on very reliably to absorb some of those PK minutes, and it is a Brent Burns, you feel good about too what that does for Cale Makar. So I'm excited about that aspect of Brent Burns. And not so different from how we talked about the role change for Lindgren coming out of New York to what it was in Colorado and why that was better suited for him. I think we'll see truth around that with Brent Burns as well.
I Megan, because there was, and we even talked about it, on that show the day before, of like, hey, as of right now, Ryan Suter is still unsigned. Right now, today, Brent Burns is the oldest player with an NHL contract. And, he'd said, do you worry about that? But that's where I'm at. What you just said, coming into a very different role here. He was playing alongside Jacob Slavin on the Carolina Hurricanes top pairing for the last number of years as a 38, 39-year-old. Now, also keep in mind, Jared Bednar, he's got pairs for like the sake of the opening lineup sheet.
Right. He'll flip and mix.
He'll mix it all around, but either way, unless something has gone terribly wrong, you're not asking Brent Burns to play number 1 minute. You're not even asking him to play number 2 minutes. You're not even asking him to play number 3 minutes. We want you to be a solid contributor, probably run the quarterback that second power play, eat some PK minutes, and be here for the vibes. Be a leader. Be a guy that this team can rally around getting him a cup. That's probably the one thing missing from what will likely be a Hall of Fame career for Brent Burns. Doesn't have a cup. Where have we heard this story before? 40-year-old defenseman comes to the Colorado Avalanche at the end of a long future Hall of Fame career seeking a Stanley Cup.
I've seen a lot of intense reactions to this parallel being drawn.
But I mean, what did I just lie about? No lies detected, Megan. No, and he's not Ray Bork. This obviously isn't the same level of that, but this is a guy who's likely heading to the Hall of Fame when he's done. He is 40 years old, and he's signing a 1-year deal with the Avs, trying to get over that last hump. And that was what he told us in his availability of like, there's one last thing I haven't crossed off the list. And that's why I'm still playing, is I'm trying to cross that off the list. And that's what my intention is, coming here. So, I think he's going to be a good guy in that room, and he is going to be when this team gets near the end of the season, there is going to be we want to help Burnsy get there.
Nathan McKinnon said you can't win with kids.
Can't win with kids.
Chris McFarland said bet.
You got the furthest.
I'm going to get 40-year-old Brent Burns.
We're going to get the oldest player in the league. The other part of this that I think is going to be fun for us is Brent Burns is a character. Now, we have been warned, he can be a little bit prickly. Granted, he got a little bit prickly when the San Jose Sharks started going downhill and he watched all of his buddies get traded to contenders and he was like, cool, I just get to miss the playoffs. But I think this is going to be a fun personality to have around.
Oh, I think so too. And I can already see Mackenzie Blackwood's energy being really complementary to Brent Burns' energy.
Yeah.
There is something a bit unsettling about both of them, but I mean that in a nice way. I mean it affectionately.
So you've heard about the backpack, right? You know about the backpack?
I do know about the backpack, but like I don't really know why.
Well, so there's kind of this Brent Burns lore. He shows up every game with this giant
his personal effects
army backpack.
He needs all of those things.
And apparently it's a lot of stuff that he needs, according to him.
His special items.
And I think we have a comment here in the chat
of the coffee maker
about that. Apparently in this bag, he has his own coffee machine, coffee maker. I haven't heard that he won't share with teammates, but I have heard that he unpacks a full coffee maker out of this giant backpack that he brings. I want to ask him about it, but I'm sure a bunch of people have asked him about it, and I don't think he has much interest in talking about it.
Well, it's none of our business. On every hero's journey, there's an item. And we don't need to know.
But have you seen the size of it? Like, this isn't like, I mean, that is a military backpack that he walks into every game with.
It does look like he is prepared to go off the grid at a moment's notice if he needed to.
And let me see if I can actually even get this pulled
up. And I respect that. Keep your secrets.
I just oh damn it. I want to get a picture of this backpack pulled up because it's even bigger than I was remembering it in my head. And what do you think is in it?
I think like a little sleeping bag so that if he I don't know. Some canned food items.
Okay. Here.
Very survival.
So that's the bag in question.
There's a little pillow, some canned goods.
I don't think there's anything little about that. I think that's like full size bedding and a king size pillow.
I think there's a week's worth of clothes in there as well.
Okay. Yep.
Skincare. Beard care for sure. There's beard conditioner in there for sure. Foil blankets and MREs.
Yes, I could see there being foil blankets. I mean, it does. It looks like
all of the tools needed to build a fire.
He's prepared to be stranded inside the arena for multiple days. That's what it looks like to me. We had a comment that said Sebastian Aho said it was half recovery stuff. He's going to fit in great with Nathan McKinnon.
Interesting. Like those leg compression.
Oh, yeah.
Kits, some red light therapy.
I know you said that with a smile on your face.
Too, that have, I think.
Oh, like the spikes on them and stuff?
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know how big they are and how compact they are to get down.
I mean, like I said, I think there's a lot that you could fit in that bag. There's the limit does not exist for what all he could put in there.
I know this comment is late into our Hakstol conversation about the power play results since he's been a coach. And I mean, I think they've been varied. Like his time in Toronto, it was a really highly ranked power play. Mm-hmm. And then over the span of his time in Seattle, it did markedly improve year by year. It just started from a pretty low place. So it was around 29th, then tied three-way tie at 19th and finished around 17th place his final year in Seattle. So I think his power play results are varied and just we didn't really specifically address the results. I'll just be curious to see what his results are with the current core here in Colorado. 3rd and 8th ranked power play during his time with Toronto. So I think it's too soon to tell what he'll be capable of doing, because I think so much of even the success in results, when you look at just where a power play finishes in the league under Bennett, with Colorado's core, it was hard for it to fail, to be honest with you. And I think that kind of papered over some of those periods we talk about where there would be stagnancy and a lull in results. And I'll be curious to see then if the consistency is different under Hakstol.
Well, and then, so tying this into Brent Burns.
Perfect.
What I do wonder is, and I wonder how much this is a Jared Bednar decision, are we going to see more deployment of that second unit, which I imagine Brent Burns will be on?
This so fascinating about Florida's success on the power play and leaning heavily on that second unit. Like, I don't know if they'll draw much inspiration from that, but that was super interesting to me.
And now you've got to have a second unit that you feel strongly about. And I know with injuries and stuff over the last couple of seasons, that's been in question at times for the Avs, but boy, oh boy, did it feel like there was way too many instances where the top unit would get 1:55 of a power play and the second unit would get 5 seconds. And I just wonder if that'll be a little bit more of an even split under Hakstol.
Because I do think it's interesting with the Avs. There's a reason to lean so heavily on that top unit because of their proven success and track record.
And who you have out there.
Exactly, who you have out there. But then what you would find the trouble is if they weren't going and you would panic return to that second unit in the final seconds of the man advantage, yeah, they aren't going to be able to do much with that. At that point, the ice is tilted in the favor of whatever that kill is on the ice. And the second unit doesn't have enough rhythm and consistency being out there that it's just not really setting yourself up for success, leaning on them in the final hour. And I think that's the difference then between Florida and their second unit, even scoring more power play goals than the first unit. When it's all said and done. I found that a very interesting statistic. And if by design you utilize them a little bit more evenly, then there's going to be more rhythm created around that second unit. The only thing that will be interesting is the ego of it all. Like, how does the top unit respond to maybe some less time on the power play? And is this something that motivates them? Is it something that...
I think if it's something that's driving results, they'll get on board with it. But I think if they're just rolling that second unit out there and it's not producing, I don't think it'd be I think it would be more of what you just said there. Motivating. Okay, we're going to solve this problem so you don't have to roll that unit out there anymore. But again, that is where I do. And it also is what makes me wonder about what is still left to be done for the Avs.
Yes.
Because Brent, like, to me, Brent Burns, like, he's been a, PP1 quarterback for fucking 15 years at this point. So, okay, you probably want him to be some level of, power play asset. Do you run him out there with Devon Taves? Is it just him? And now suddenly you can go back to 4 forwards, 1 defenseman for that second unit. Does that make it more enticing to use more often? I don't know. Do you go back to the old 3 defensemen on the second power play unit with Girard, Taves, and Burns? I don't know. It's definitely going to add to the shifting dynamics of the power play is the most regular way I can think to put it.
Yeah, and given the options they've had in the past, like with a Byram once upon a time in that rotation as well, I'm not sure it'll be this huge, crazy change. But the overall impact of Brent Burns, I think, will be alleviating to players like Makar, who don't have to spend as much time on the kill. And there's more trust in him to just absorb minutes 5v5 over the course of a game. And it's an interesting addition to that right side, too, which I think is overall very interesting.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So it's hard to find a lot of right-handed defensemen in the NHL. Suddenly the Avs have 4 out of 6 that are right-handed D. Do you see this being a problem? I don't, just so you know.
No, but it's a problem if you like team Sam Malinsky and you want him to get minutes and reps and it somehow comes at the expense of him, But I don't know that it does, to be honest with you.
I don't think it does. I think, again, I think the part that has to be kept in mind is the way that Jared Bednar uses all of his players, but his D pairs in particular. There's so much shuffling that goes on. He doesn't have a lot of like traditional righty, lefty, righty. Like we've seen lefties play together before in Jared Bednar's system. We've seen righties play together before in Jared Bednar's system. We've seen this righty play with this lefty, and these righties and lefties normally play together, but this righty and this righty are going to take this face off. Like, I don't think it's going to really come at the expense of it. Someone's going to have to be comfortable playing on their offside every few shifts. But again, like I think that's something that is just kind of expected if you're playing in the Avs system. You're going to have to play somewhere that's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's good versatility for players to get that experience on their offside. And I know that Bednar doesn't like fully trust it as a full-time thing. So it is in game, just some of the mixing that will inevitably happen. And I think in looking at the current options for the decor, I think everyone's going to get a chance to eat. And it's just a matter of who's going to step up to the plate. And so I'm being a little bit silly when I say it might come at the expense of opportunity. But what is a reality is, there was a stretch where Malinsky was sitting games, and it's because his play had just sort of stagnated, and they needed to get a little bit more out of him. And they did. And Manson has dealt with some injury trouble now the last couple of seasons that has made his availability a bit unpredictable, that I think it's just insurance on the right side, to be honest with you. And that to me is certainly not a problem. It's very smart.
Yeah. And again, just unfortunately with Josh Manson, you do have to plan on the fact that he probably will not be available to you for at least some stretch of games. So no, I think that's a great call out as well. What's still left? We got to get into the bottom 6. CMAC was asked about EJ. And hey, are you guys, he wasn't a name that you mentioned. He said they have had talks with Eric Johnson. They're standing pat right now. I think if you went into this season, and I guess that's another righty. I'll say if you went into this season with him as your 7th D, you feel fine about that. But
they should hire him as the assistant behind the Eagles bench. That's all. Perfect.
Yeah. What else? Is there anything else? I mean, obviously you got to figure out what's going on in that bottom.
Yeah.
Bottom
not to
part
be
of your
dramatic,
forward.
I'm very worried about the Avs third line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm extremely worried. It's very incomplete. I have nothing against Joel Kiviranta, and this isn't pointed at him, but
Clearly the league does.
I don't think that is the solution to the Avs bottom 6. Now, I'm not going to be disappointed if they do find some sort of agreement, work out with him, but
I'll come out and say it, and Chloe's going to get up and come to this window. I would be disappointed if they ran it back with Joel Kiviranta.
I would, because I would feel more comfortable with him as a 13th forward, 4th line option,
Right.
and their 4th line's pretty set. I mean, I know Logan O'Connor's going to miss a little bit time at the start of the year, but I just think they have bigger work to do on that third line, and I want to see them take a bigger swing than just versatile Kiviranta, because it was very telling to me when Jared Bednar would talk about why he liked putting Kivi in that third line spot when kind of there was a rotation of guys between like Miles Wood and VC. And the reason Kiviranta went out in that is because of how versatile he is. And you could tell there's like an asterisk by versatile. It's just like, this is a neutral compliment. He's not necessarily adding, but I know he's not taking away from the third line, and I'm cool with that. And so this, again, it's not to be super pointed at Kiviranta. I think that's still a great skill in a bottom 6 player, but you need more than that for this third line.
He got exposed on that third line in round 1. Like, it just became very obvious. Like, yeah, this is a guy who was playing over his head in a positive way in the regular season. He was finding ways to contribute. Versatile player, a little Swiss Army knife.
He's inoffensive both ways,
Right,
both
right.
meanings of that word.
Right. That's a great way to put it. But then when Ross Colton went down, who I think is a true third line, middle six player, like it was glaring. Like, oh, that guy doesn't belong there. And I would like to see a better solution for that.
I need to see a player that adds to that line and isn't just neutral, because it was exposed as a weak spot in the lineup. And, going back to what the Avs can take away from Florida's success this last year, in addition to utilizing both units on the power play, they had a completely loaded stack third line. Now that will be hard for the Avs to emulate just with where they've prioritized other areas of their lineup. But even still, I want to see them commit to pouring resources into that third line to make it better.
Now here's the great news.
Mark Sendin re-signed with the Colorado Eagles is great news. You are correct, Jesse. No, this isn't even a joke, though. If you've been listening for a while, I love this player with the Eagles, and I'm glad he's back.
In regards to the third line, the good news is your roster doesn't have to be set by the end of the first week of free agency. I've talked around to a few folks. I think the Avs have taken some swings. I don't think they've been able to obviously land anything quite yet.
Ehlers.
On the trade market more so. I know they've explored what's out there. And I think they're going to continue to do that. And I think you're in a really good spot. I'm with you. That third line, that's a much better spot to be in. We need to get some wings for our third line versus we need a 2C. We need top six help. Like, you can fill out that bottom part of your lineup, especially if you get into the season, maybe get a team to give you a trade with some salary retention.
Trade one of those right-handed defensemen that you're in excess of. I'm just kidding. I don't want that.
But I really am. I'm kind of back looking more at what are some trades that we could maybe see them make to fill out the bottom part of this lineup? And I think that's going to be something that's ongoing all the way up through training camp. This is a team that loves to get involved in PTOs. Don't be surprised to see a Jeff Skinner PTO. I don't know.
I don't hate that.
I don't either.
Someone mentioned Mason McTavish earlier in the chat.
I wanted to bring him up just now, but I was like, at that point, am I like officially stumping for Mason McTavish? But he has not signed a new deal with the Ducks.
I will be ashamed to officially stand Mason McTavish.
I would love that one. I think that would be such a fun way to add some really exciting punch to the middle part of your lineup and kind of reset some age a little bit here. Now something you've got a young player that you're really excited about. I love the idea of Mason McTavish in Colorado.
I think middle six role in Anaheim is different from middle six role in Colorado too, because I do think critically of his usage in Anaheim that he was being played a role below what he should have been at, and it hampered his development a little bit. And I think just this last year, he started to get brought up to speed with where I felt he should be utilized in Anaheim. So maybe it would feel like a demotion to be a third line player in Colorado, but I would view this as a promotion in terms of role and the expectation of where this group is supposed to go this year. That's a lot of responsibility. So I'd be excited about it, but it's not even a name that's being linked to McTavish.
No.
We're the ones doing it. Yeah. So that's, it's just purely, I think the fit is completely there. And that is a name I'd get excited about helping to fill out that role on the third line.
All right. I'm going to end this show by throwing one more name at you. And this is probably more of a 3rd/4th line guy. Are you ready?
No, I don't think I'm going to like it.
Would you like to guess what I'm going to say?
Is it Roslovic?
No, it's not.
Good.
Old friend, Nikolai Kovalenko.
Oh, no, yes, I'm interested.
Still a UFA. Sharks elected not to bring him back. I imagine he's looking for an NHL job before he heads back to Russia. Like I said, that would be more of a fourth line guy, but still out there. Probably get him very cheap.
Yeah, I am still so surprised by how things really did not work out in San Jose with him. And I don't know, there have been different types of players in this weird category where they kind of fall to the wayside and they end up just going back overseas because there's more money and more stability to be made and had there. I don't think Kovalenko is in that window, and I think it would be a shame to not explore what could exist for him at the NHL level. I don't think he's fully explored it yet at this point. It's still too soon into his journey. So
57 games played last year between the Avs and the Sharks, 7 goals, 20 points.
It was interesting too, because he really fell out of favor in San Jose quickly. So that's going to limit opportunity.
Which I thought was so fucking crazy. I've said that. I said I owe $3.
Swear jar.
I was so surprised. He seemed like from the limited viewings I had of him in San Jose, seemed like he clicked well with Celebrini.
I thought so too.
And I was like, ooh, man, is this going to be a moment that the Avs kind of
regret
look silly?
This trade?
Right. Because this player is going to assimilate to playing next to this high-end, young superstar in the making. And then it just kind of went away. But he was the idea was always supposed to be with Nikolai Kovalenko. Bring him over and groom him into just a menace in the bottom part of your lineup. And cool. So now you got Mackenzie Blackwood for him. Go bring him back.
Yeah.
Free player, free trade.
Because the sense I got in him being kind of packaged in this deal was the shiny piece to help get it across the finish line, because he had been playing in Colorado's top 6, middle 6, moonlighting on the top unit at times because there were so many injuries and weird stuff was happening at the start of the year. Terry Lehkonen wasn't available to the Avs at the start of this last year. And so Nikolai Kovalenko really had the carpet rolled out for him in terms of opportunity, and he seized it pretty well.
Yeah, I thought he was fine.
And so I think that's why he had value in that trade. So it was weird for it to just totally wheels fall off when he gets to San Jose. And I have theories around that, but I don't think it's his fault.
Yeah. And he's just an intriguing name that I think would be
I think Evan would be really happy.
He'd throw a summer barbecue. Vaguely, if you actually send us a swear jar, it will live right here on the set, and we will end every show by putting dollars into it.
Also, Vaguely, it's so good to see you back in here.
Yes.
We noticed you were MIA, but you explained earlier in the chat, and I'm sorry work's been bananas for you.
Yeah, that sounds not fun. Said he had only slept in his bed 5 times since the Avs had lost in the first round. Hey, thanks. Good to see you again. And we're looking forward to your transfer out to Colorado. That'll be fun. Go back. Oh, all right. Now I'm actually ending the show. I already know what your answer is going to be on a PTO. Evgeny Kuznetsov?
Fine.
Really?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's not what I thought you were going to say.
That's fine.
All right. I don't know if that'd be good for Val.
I think the secret to something being good for Val is Val being good for Val.
That's the only way to end it. That's the only way to end it, folks. Cosign on what you just said. That's going to do it. We'll be back in action tomorrow or later this week. I don't fully know. We haven't worked it out yet. But we are starting to pull together our planning for next year. So we're going to come back with a lot more consistency, and we're going to start to move into what next year's plan and all that stuff is. So I'm really looking forward to all that. But this is definitely a crazy year, and we've leaned into the off season here to get into June and July. But coming out of it, feeling recharged, all that good stuff. So we'll be back later this week. That's going to do it. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Chloe Thiel behind the glass today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Guerrilla Sports Off Ice, brought to you by Trusted American Mortgage. We'll talk to you guys later this week. See you later.
Bye.